Hey everybody, ReefGrrl here and welcome to my channel. What I'm showing you is the 90-gallon holding tank on January the 18th of 2021. Look closely. Do you see any algae? No? Well, this video will tell you how I reached this point after being overrun with all kinds of algae just 4 months ago. Before we get into that, I would love it if you haven't already, if you'd subscribe to my channel. And while you're over there, hit that notification bell to stay right up to date with everything that's going on. That includes the new build, 300-gallon display, plus about another 300 gallons of basement sump. You won't want to miss it because, as usual, I'm doing things just a little differently from how most people do them. So let's go back to late August of 2020. If you follow my channel, you'll know that on August the 8th, I had a mass fish death that took out 8 of my 13 fish, including a tomini tang and a foxface. Algae soon started to bloom everywhere, and someone suggested I get a sea urchin, so I did. At this point, the tank was in a fragile state because of a couple of mistakes that I made in addressing ammonia spikes after the fish died. So I didn't want to use any further chemicals to address the algae. My whole plan was to try and take care of it using only natural means, if at all possible. And look at this, mere days later, Ernie the urchin has cleared off the rocks all around the area where I first placed him. In my research, I learned that sea urchins often starve when they run out of algae in a tank. I think it's going to be a while in this tank for one little sea urchin to take care of all of this. So in view of all this algae, and also because I like them, I decided to get a lawnmower blenny. He also started chewing away at all the various bits and pieces of algae here and there. While we leave the elusive blenny to his work, let's see what the urchin is up to. Ever wonder what your urchin is doing at night? Check this out. This is a blue tuxedo urchin, and he's decorated himself with a bunch of the loose algae that's all over the place in this tank. I had no idea he got so furry with those long tubule legs or whatever they are, and it's fascinating to watch him. These little guys are also called decorator urchins, and for good reason. They pick up little bits and pieces from all over the tank. I guess it's a form of camouflage from what I've read. By this point, I'd had the urchin and the blenny for a couple of weeks. Definitely less algae on the coral skeletons, and it seemed to be receding from the corals that were still trying to grow. And one day I noticed that this bivalve, which I've had for 8 years and had been completely covered in algae, was now clean. The algae was diminishing over time. Sometime in early October, though, I came across this little guy at my local fish store. I called him Sparky when I brought him home. He was one of several that the store had brought in for a customer, and then the customer changed their mind. So he had been at the store for quite a while. He's very healthy, active, loved the little guy. And as soon as I got him, things really started to accelerate. Mind you, I did give them all a little bit of help. This whole central area was covered with very stubborn turf algae. I could reach it, so I decided to do something about it. I got my curvy, sharp tweezers and a small net, and I started pulling algae out by hand. Never be afraid to do this. It is one of the best ways to help get ahead of it. Pretty soon, I had to switch to a different kind of container. I was getting so much of it. This is about a half hour's work, which I did every other day for around 3 weeks. So even though I'm not a natural predator of algae, I got a lot of it out of here. As early November came along, I started to notice my corals getting very pale. Some of them started to get pretty close to white. This is a season's greetings. It's super pale green. And my acroporas also looked like they were starting to bleach out. They didn't start growing algae, so I knew they still had tissue. My theory? That the algae was consuming nutrients from the water that the corals needed. So I started adding more coral food to the water, specifically for them, such as Reef and some Brightwell products containing phytoplankton. I still kept up with manual removal as much as I could, and I relied on my urchin, my blenny, and Sparky the tang to continue doing what they did best. While all this was going on, my snails were doing a great job. I have 8 or 9 fairly large turbo snails. I also decided to add some emerald crabs to take care of a little bit of bubble algae here and there. They did a wonderful job. There is none anymore. And finally, about a dozen blue-legged hermit crabs went in here. They're known for getting right into crevices at the root of algae. I just hoped they would not become a snack for the green wrasse. Here's a before and after photo for one of my manual algae removal sessions. It's amazing how easy it became to get this stuff off the rocks after a while. It was loosening up really well. By December 20th, I was ready to do the final tour of No More Algae. All of the natural measures I used, including the human predator, did the trick. Sea urchin, lawnmower blenny, yellow tang, turbo snails, blue-legged hermit crabs, and emerald crabs all contributed to reaching this point. And as you can see here, I'm now having to feed the algae eaters with nori. One thing I never really mentioned throughout the course of this video is the mollies. I kind of take them for granted because I always have them in my tanks to help with algae, and that's something I'm going to continue to do going forward. There is one drawback to the natural method of algae control, and that's the time it takes. This took 4 months, and it required patience. But the way I see it, patience is a foundation skill of successful reef keeping. I had the additional obstacle of the fact that this reef is not in my house. I had to travel 3 to 4 days a week to somebody else's house to look after it. So besides the devastation of losing so many of my beloved fish, I then had algae descend on this tank. I'm really glad I took the time and made the effort to get it under control without using any chemicals. Thanks for watching. As always, I really appreciate it.